All right, so if you have -5 minus -6, you're going to do step 1 first. Step 1 will be to rewrite the problem if necessary. So if you have two negative signs, those two signs will turn into a positive, and I put the notes over here. Two negatives signs turn to a positive, a negative and a positive sign will just turn to a negative sign. So if you rewrite it, you'll have -5 plus 6. Now if you move on to step 2, it says determine whether to add or subtract. If it has the same signs, you'll add, different, subtract. If you look at both of these, you have different signs. That means you're going to subtract, different, subtract. So now I'm going to do 6 minus 5. I know 6 minus 5 gives me 1. Now the last step, step 3, is to find the absolute value to determine if your answer is positive or negative. I know the absolute value of 6 is 6. Absolute value of -5 is 5. So obviously I know 6 is bigger than 5. So your answer will take the sign of the number with the greatest absolute value. So your answer is +1. So for this next problem, we have -324 plus -236. So if we look at step 1, we're going to rewrite the problem. The reason why we rewrite the problem, the only time I rewrite the problem is if I see two signs next to each other, because that looks confusing. So I'm going to rewrite it. So now we have -324, and if you have a positive and negative next to each other, remember that turns into a negative sign, minus 236. So if you think of it if you owe somebody $324 and then somebody gives you -$236. Another way of saying that is just taking away 236. All right, so now we're going to move to step 2. Now we need to figure out whether to add or subtract these numbers. If you have the same signs, you add, different, subtract. I like to circle the numbers because it helps me to see the signs better. And I can see that these signs are the same. They're the same. So when they're the same, I'm going to add. So I'm going to add 324 plus 236. When I add that, that's going to give me 560. So my answer is going to be either positive or negative 560. In order to figure out whether it's positive or negative, I'm going to have to do step 3. Find the absolute values to determine if your answer is positive or negative. So I know both of these numbers are negative, so either way I know my answer has to be negative. And if it helps you to remember better by thinking of absolute value, look at the greater number, 300, the number with the greater absolute value. Absolute value is 324. The absolute value of -236 is just 236. So I know 324 is bigger than 236. So I know my I know that my answer will take the sign of the number with the greatest absolute value, which is 324. So I know my answer will be negative. So my answer is -560. For this next one, I want you to pause it, solve the problem first, and then unpause me so that I don't give you the answer. Try to go through each step, step 1, step 2, step 3, and then unpause to see if you did it correctly. So go ahead and pause, solve the problem. All right, so step 1 is to rewrite the problem only if necessary. Okay, so we see over here, it is necessary to rewrite the problem because we have two negatives. Like I wrote down here, two negatives is going to make a positive. So if you have 34 and then you have minus -67, that's going to turn to plus 67. And now we see it's basic addition, which is positive numbers. 67 plus 34. So 7 plus 4 gives you 11. Okay, so now our answer is 101. And you know, obviously, since we're adding two positive numbers, our answer is going to be positive. Go ahead and pause the video and try to solve. All right, so the first step says to rewrite the problem only if necessary. I see that there's two signs, so I need to rewrite it. I don't like when I have two signs because it looks very confusing. So I'm going to rewrite 93, and I know if I ever have a positive and negative, it turns into one sign, just a negative, minus 61. So now, step 2 says determine whether add or subtract. So I'm going to circle both of these. It makes it a little easier for me. I know if I have 93, that's the same thing as positive 93. So if you have different signs, you subtract. So I'm going to take 93 and subtract 61. Now I get 32. However, I don't know if my answer is positive 32 or negative. So now I'm going to find the absolute values of both. The absolute value of 93 is 93. The absolute value of negative 61 is 61. So I know 93 has a greater absolute value, so my answer is going to take on the positive sign. My answer is positive 32. However, you don't really need to write the positive, so you can just write 32. Go ahead and pause the video and try to solve it on your own. So step 1 says to rewrite the problem if necessary. This problem does not need to be rewritten because it only has one sign. So we can go straight to step 2. Determine whether to add or subtract. So we know the rule is same signs add, different subtract. So if you circle this will help you a little bit if you circle the numbers. It'll help you to see the signs easier. I can see that they're both negative, so they're the same signs. So I know because they're the same signs, I'm going to add 37 plus 17. I know when I add those numbers, I get 54. However, I need step 3 to tell me whether my answer is positive or negative. The absolute value, since both of these are negative, you really don't have to think through this. You know your answer is going to be negative. So our answer is negative 54. Sometimes it helps to put in a word problem. Imagine that you owed somebody $37 and now you owe them $17 more. You're still in the negative. Go ahead and pause the video and try to solve on your own. So if you have 38 and you subtract 83, what would you get? Step 1, rewrite the problem only if necessary. You don't need to rewrite because you only have one sign. So we can hop straight to step 2. Determine whether to add or subtract. Remember, same signs add, different subtract. So I'm going to circle. I see that I have different signs, so I need to subtract 83 minus 38. Obviously, I know I cannot subtract 8 from if I only have 3, so I need to regroup. Now, if you're still struggling with subtraction, it's okay. Go ahead and count up from 8 to 13. After 8 comes 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. And you can count up from 3 to 7. If you're still struggling with subtraction, it's okay. All right, so now we have 45. However, we don't know if it's positive or negative 45. So we're going to move on to step 3 to help us. Find the absolute value. Absolute value is 83. Absolute value is 38. So I know 83 is bigger than 38. So I know my answer is going to take the sign of the number with the greatest absolute value. So I know my answer will be negative. My answer is negative 45. For the next slides, I want you to do the next few on your own, and I'll have the answers on the following slide.